I'm Tom from Do-It-Yourself Home Automation, and I'm pleased to share I was recently contacted by people from SimCam. This is an AI-driven surveillance camera for your home with a question about testing the device. So they're actually going to send me a couple of these or one of these for me to test and share my experiences here. So yeah, I'm excited to get it. I think this is a really interesting new category of kind of Internet of Things devices, which is devices that not only are connected to the cloud in some way or work with in this case Alexa and IFTTT, sort of the existing ecosystem of home automation products, but also where there's an element of intelligence on the device itself. And I think the first generation of these kinds of webcams and devices were really just sort of a pipeline to the cloud, and all of the interesting stuff was happening on the cloud. And that's pretty much the case for Nest cameras, for Wise cameras for the most part. Maybe they have some basic on-device intelligence just to detect events and turn the camera on and off. In the case of smart speakers, they can detect when you say the wake word for the speaker, but really as soon as they're activated, they're really just sending data off to the cloud, and all of the processing of that data is taking place somewhere far away on a server, and then data is being handed back to the devices. And I think in the early days this was basically because you couldn't do too much on the device itself, especially with computer vision and that kind of thing, and AI. There really wasn't an ability to do it right there on these tiny devices that had to be pretty inexpensive in the home. So it was basically just a pipeline into the cloud where that more advanced processing could happen. I think in the future, though, we're starting to see companies offering devices with some of the AI and especially computer vision built in. And this is facilitated in some ways by just new hardware that's available. So the SimCam, one of the things I was excited about with this is that it uses a proprietary computer vision dedicated chip from Intel. And really, I mean, you could say it's probably just a lens and some algorithms wrapped around that chip for the most part. I mean, the camera itself and that kind of thing, it does have night vision. It has the sort of capabilities that we're used to seeing in the market. Obviously a Wi-Fi chip, that kind of thing. But I think the most exciting piece of this is the fact that what they're advertising anyway is they're using this Intel Vision chip in the device itself to do some of the AI and processing for things like people detection and object detection on the actual camera, rather than having to send data into the cloud and do it on a server somewhere else. And I think some of the advantages of this are battery life, for one thing. So if you can do this and not have to be constantly streaming video, then you're probably going to have better battery life if it's something plugged in to a battery and not the wall. This one, I believe, is plugged into the wall to power it. But one other advantage is potentially better control of your data. If more of the processing can happen on the device and you're not having to send data off to the cloud to someone else to be analyzed, then you have a little more control over where your data is flowing. And I think the last piece is just speed. It's sort of a time-consuming and bandwidth-consuming transaction to send everything off to the cloud, have it processed, have it all come back with results. Even with really good cloud servers, it's still going to add some time. So the ability to do this kind of processing on the device itself, I think, is something we're going to see a lot more of, and you're going to see smarter functions, maybe custom wake words for smart speakers, or in this case, what they're promising is some kind of advanced AI features right on the camera. So let's scroll down and see what they're offering. This is sort of standard with a lot of the webcams like Wise and Nest cameras. Person detection, always an important thing, always useful, so it can flag if there's a person in your house, especially at night, so you could see, this sort of generic intruder coming in. They advertise that it's a more accurate system than, it's not detecting shadows and that kind of thing. I love these these very sort of campy drawings of a thief here, kind of stock photo things, but I think that's standard function. Where it gets a little more interesting to me is that this can actually recognize individual people. So this is something that a lot of companies have probably looked at. Not a lot of them are doing. and it claims 99% facial recognition accuracy. So the idea is you train it to recognize your family members, to recognize guests, and it can actually know when it sees that specific person in the frame. So they're showing this, in a couple of different contexts: a child returning home, maybe an elderly family member. If you're monitoring and using this as a nanny cam, you can track the specific people that the camera is seeing. So, that's sort of an interesting capability, but where I think it gets particularly interesting is they say it's integrated with IFTTT. And this is a system where you can connect different devices, smart devices in your home together, and they can work together with each other. So you can, trigger a particular event on your hue lights, for example, based on any kind of trigger, something changing in your house, or a sensor detecting some kind of event, or a voice trigger with one of your smart speakers. So what this would potentially offer, if it really can detect individual people, is you could trigger certain routines in your home based on who the camera is seeing. So, you could mount this in your garage, and when it sees you specifically return home, maybe it knows you like the house to be set to 70, versus if it sees other family members, they want the house to be set to 72. And it could detect you in the feed from the cam, do an IFTTT trigger that would adjust your Nest thermostat, and set the temperature in the house to your preferred temperature. Or maybe you have a guest who really likes it cold, so as soon as they sees that person at the door, maybe it could turn down the temperature. Or if you return home and you want the lights in your office to come on only when you come home, but not when someone else does, for example. Again, you could use that facial recognition, do an IFTTT trigger that would control your hue lights or other smart lights. So I think there's a lot of interesting personalization here where it's detecting a specific person. I'm excited to check that out. Night vision, I'm not sure what the Starlight night vision is. I think that's pretty standard on these cameras. I'll be curious to see how that works. And I like the way that they're showing these sort of alerts. So it's saying, the person that was seen, where that's being seen, and they have apparently a app where you can access the data from the camera. So this is actually processing videos locally. And again, this is the Intel chip that I was talking about that's on the camera. So they're not putting this off onto the cloud. And I think this is interesting. Probably one of the reasons they're doing this that's, I think, significant is this is a Chinese company. I know there's been concerns recently in the United States around some, Chinese technologies and Chinese companies, and, data access and that kind of thing. So the fact that this is all happening locally on the device is probably reassuring to people, and even just, in general, beyond any kind of politically motivated questions about, AI and that kind of thing. When you're doing facial recognition, when you're storing data from your home, it's a little bit concerning sometimes to have that go off into the cloud where you don't have control over who has it. You don't even know who has it. It may travel to a contractor and you don't even know about that. So, the idea of doing this locally is something that I think is facilitated by having the intelligence built into the camera, because you're not relying on some off-site cloud server to do the processing of the video. It's all able to happen locally. Now, where does it store data? It's on a micro SD card. You can also sync it to, in this case, it's showing it looks like a network-attached storage box, so you can back up your info. One question I have is how the app works with this sort of idea of keeping the video local. How are you able to access it on a smartphone, for example, if they're not putting the video into the cloud, or are they putting it into the cloud but not storing it there? Something I'll take a look into as I start to test out the device. They have an indoor and outdoor version. It's apparently pretty easy to set this up and mount it on the wall, upside down on the ceiling. Again, I'm seeing this, I'm actually wondering if I was wrong and maybe this is a battery-powered device. Again, that would be something facilitated by doing the processing on the device instead of streaming off. Again, I'll look into that more. 24-hour recording, one app to rule them all is their way of saying that they have an app for this. Yeah, it says Wi-Fi and AC power. Again, I'm not 100% clear on whether it needs to be plugged in because I don't see cables in this little graphic here, so we'll see when the actual cameras arrive. And then, 2-way audio, another standard feature. And there's a privacy mode where you can shut everything off. So, this is apparently retailing for $149. They did a Kickstarter to fund this, but again, they're going to send me one to check out, and I'll take a look at how that works, and probably share a couple of videos about using the SimCam, and particularly really excited to look into the AI features a little bit more. If you found this helpful in any way, or you want to see my reviews and other information about the SimCam once I receive it, please subscribe to my channel. It really helps.